Good evening and good night. And if you can think of any more, then you come up with them. The title of today's Dharma talk is Abusers, Liars, and Thieves. This was suggested as a topic by Sanho, Mountain Phoenix. I think that's what I named him. Anyway, thank you for that title. Good one. Now, what am I going to say about that? What would you say if you had to do this? Excuse me. First, start at the top. No, wait a minute. Let's start at the bottom. Let's start at the bottom. Let's start not on the outside. Let's start on the inside. Any abusing going on here? Any lying going on here? Move this top one, will you? Good, thank you. So is there? Find out. It's so easy to just ignore that and distract yourself, ignorance. Feed yourself with something, passion, or to destroy, beat up on something, push it away, aggression. So easy to do that, especially when the inner oligarch, the inner abuser, liar, and thief has not been seen, is continually covered up by what? Fear. By fear, by hope of something better, by hope of sometimes it gets so difficult, people just end this incarnation because it's so intense. No mind training. And I don't mean being a Buddhist. If you've listened to me very long, you know I don't promote anything. But yeah, there's that one thing I promote. Find out who you are. Train your mind. Don't go and let another day go by without finding out who this is. Or at least begin looking there. Sit down, hold still. Look at the wall, and eventually looking at the wall. Even though your eyes stay open, you eventually begin to look within, which is not another direction. It sure looks that way, doesn't it? Doesn't it look like there's an outside and inside? That's a movable feast. You can eat in any direction. You can feed in any direction. You can feed on the exterior world to confirm your ideas, your opinions, your lies, your self-deceit, your other deceit. Movable. You thought that was a movie, didn't you? I feel like if I can drink enough coffee with cream, I'll eventually be able to clear up my throat. So far, not so good. So the idea here with training the mind is, and with addressing the topic that Sanho has suggested here, that we would all like to hear more about because it's all over the place. The leaders of the world are showing up as strong people, strong men, wanting to control and manipulate and be in charge, be dictators. It's quite rampant these days. But you know, that is not, that's not something that's just coming out of nowhere. That is dependently arisen. That is a complicated leviathan that is untraceable, unsearchable, sourceless, that is coming out of the dark into the present moment. You can't trace it. And I'm sure you've noticed you can't really do anything about the head of the dragon. The head of the dragon is there, but you can't find the other end. Even though we try to stop that by blaming, by talking to each other, by whatever, from who is your therapist to who you're going to vote for. But I'm not mocking anyone. Do whatever you need to do. Take whatever meds you need. If you need Wellbutrin, take it. If you need Prozac, take it. If you need to drink, drink it. Try to use a microbrew, though. A lot better for you. Healthier. Or don't drink at all. You don't need to drink. You might need to feel like you need to drink, but not do anything about it. This is a form of not particular discipline, not particularly renunciation, but it may show up that way. Next time I clear my throat, I'm not going to do it anymore. So the idea with the inner abuser, liar, thief, cheater, manipulator, you can think of a few more words, I'm sure you can too, is not acknowledged, then that so-called aspect of consciousness has been pushed down, ignored, repressed, depressed, or whatever you want to call it, and you seem to be having a pretty good life. Then along comes Goliath. Along comes an intense a being who is an abuser, a liar. I don't need to. You all know I'm talking about Bolsonaro, right? You all know I'm talking about, who's that guy in the UK?
Johnson.
Yeah, I wasn't asking a question, making a statement. Unyo's helping me by telling me it's Johnson. She thinks I didn't know that. So this is why these people who have this have the karma, the personality, the structure in their life to bring them into prominence as public figures, as soon as they show up, because of their uninspected karma and or inner confusion, and because they're somehow found a way to validate this, and I'm just going to be the person I've been trying to get rid of, or not. Maybe they haven't been. You have the right parents, they will encourage your deceit, your lies. And so that when that individual comes into prominence, then all of the repression or the subduing of the individual of literally billions of people that's been shut down may resonate positively, may resonate negatively. That's where all these votes come from. Is finally somebody that knows how I feel, or some other ridiculous commentary coming out of the self-centered seventh consciousness of the mind. Train your mind. You don't have to do what I say, but train your mind. But if you listen close enough, your own mind is saying that. It's saying it like, what the hell am I going to do? Well, remember this. Find out who you are. If the identity goes uninspected, then this continued the continuation of the confusion, of the delusion, of the suffering will just continue. It may go behind the clouds for a few minutes, but it's coming back out. So if you have someone in your milieu, in your crowd, in your family, that's a difficult one because of the blood connection, you can't actually walk away from that person. So if the abuse is coming from that direction, then you might try receiving that for a while. And receiving it is just to listen to it. Don't agree, don't disagree. Unless you're asked, then you could possibly disagree. But generally speaking, those abusers, those liars, those thieves are difficult. So if you're training your mind and you're dealing with your own inner abuser, thief, self-deception, I'm not accusing you of anything. Perhaps you're an angel. Perhaps you're so far along the bodhisattva path that you don't need to worry about that anymore. But the whole world is worrying about it and then upset by it and confused by it. And you could start right in the exact footprints that are under your toes. Start there and train your mind. No longer believe any thought patterns. No longer believe any emotions. I'm not saying to go the other direction and disbelieve it. That's why mind training is so important, because the ego mind wants a reference point, and it will take a reference point, any reference point it can get, as long as it creates the illusion of security. At least I know what to do. Well, at least you've heard that. You probably said it. I know I've said it. Otherwise I wouldn't know about it. I know when I went in the Marine Corps many, many years ago, once I got in there, it was horrible. But I would say to myself, well, at least I have something to do. At least I'm not confused, because I know what I have to do. Somebody's telling me. Some stylized oligarch called the first sergeant. I have to think about that for another 3.5 years. But then coming out of that, right back into the confusion, the desperation about what should I do? What do I do with all of this insanity that is arising in the mind stream of this person? Train your mind. See what this is. See. Don't get your information from me. I'll support you. I'll encourage you. I'll function on whatever level is the most helpful to you. And it may be talking to me every 6 months. Maybe never talking to me again. Maybe talking to me every day. Maybe talking to someone else. Maybe listening to someone else. Listen. Receive even going back to Sanho's question, how do we deal with this? Receive it in such a way that you don't oppose it, you don't agree with it, and you don't distract yourself from it by some idea about it. Have a willingness to not know. The confusion is so vast and difficult that the only thing that can work with that is space. And what is space? Prajna. It's not a thing. It's not an item. It's not a belief system. It's not even a Buddha. It's not even a Bodhisattva. It is beyond all of that. It's beyond consciousness. Don't believe anything I say. Don't disbelieve it, and don't look away. You hear me say that constantly. Not easy to do that. And it's very situational. So situationally, if your cousin, your brother, your mother, your dad, or someone in close proximity is abusive to you in some way because of their confusion and their difficulty, well, you can keep your distance, first of all, if it's possible. But if you're 4 years old, you're not going to be able to keep your distance because you're getting abused by someone who towers over you. That's difficult to address. If that has happened to you, it's very likely because of the intense fear and pain and suffering that happened in that particular time when you were very young. It's probably been covered up. Continue to cover it up. Live the rest of your life until you're 78, 103. But you can't get rid of that. You can't get rid of that necessarily, perhaps. But that needs to be looked at, dealt with. It is dependently arisen, and it does not belong to anybody. And all of that is beyond praise and blame. If you don't understand, in a few minutes, I'll stop talking. You can ask questions about it. I'm not saying there isn't a direct cause and effect between two things, but one is ignoring the countless numbers of things that have to occur before that one person abuses that person. And if you ignore that, you're just part of the merry-go-round. You might be the really good part, the really nice horse that has blonde flowing hair, instead of the one with horns and snarling teeth. Why do you think in the Tibetan tradition there is beings of demons like Dorje Bernagchen, the black-gowned one? Why do you think they're there? Why do you think they have been brought into the Dharma? Because you need to look at that negativity. You can't just say, well, that's negative. I'm not looking at that. Have some guts. I almost said for Christ's sake, but I'm not working for him anymore. And no, I'm not mocking any religious faith or tradition at all whatsoever. You should do what you need to do. I will support you. I've had students that have gone back into Catholicism. I support them. I've had ones that have left this and gone to study under Theravada monks. I support them. Why wouldn't I? They want to train their mind in another way. I don't have the right way. There isn't any such thing. So it seems to be necessary to see instead of constantly looking outside at the outside guys that are abusers or thieves or crooks or whatever. They're pretty obvious, and they have their supporters. That community of people who have not held that down until somebody shows up and resonates as a particular frequency that suddenly all the things you've been trying to get rid of, you think, well, here's someone who's actually living, that resonates with that. And then there's the other situation, other ones who look at that and say, oh my, there's my father, or there's my situation. Awareness. It's about awareness. It's not about concluding. If you're concluding, you're just shutting down the very wisdom eye that's trying to see what this is. If you conclude anything, it's too early. If you exclude anything, it's too early. On the other hand, I say include, because that's of the polarities, that's the best one, because that at least you're beginning to look at it. But even inclusion could take its time. Don't be too anxious about being the great includer. Well, at least I've included everything. No, you haven't. I can continue to talk, or I can respond to questions if you have them. Wait, can't stop, can't hear. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can now, yes.
You brought up an example of if we were abused as a child, we probably covered that up out of fear, and it might get triggered later.
Yes.
How does looking at the current trigger or the situation that's happening right now allow us to see what got covered up originally?
It may not. But we have to start somewhere. And when I say I may not, I mean it might not happen next week or next year or in 3 years. But if you continue, it can't stay under those rocks. It can't stay under that umbrella. It can't stay there. It just can't remain. Because because you are continuing to what? Look at that and look at that and look at that. And you may look at that and you may find yourself being afraid or backing away or starting to blame others. I have a lot of students who are extremely intelligent people, much more intelligent than I am, who blame others for how they feel. You can't do that. These are your feelings. And don't go the other way and think there's some person who's necessarily feeling that. There's just feeling. There's no individual anywhere. But if you look in the mirror and it constantly says, no, yeah, there is. I'm the person with beautiful lips and ears that I've had plastic surgery on. Now they're stuck to my head where they should be. Am I mocking you? Kind of. But not really. Not really. I mean, just have a sense of humor about the whole situation. And that's difficult if, in response to Junshu's question, if you feel afraid and mad and upset and whatever it may be. And one of the ways to release some of that is to point. And one of the ways to release that is to point. Any pointing, even though the whole legal system is built on that, because they don't know what else to do. Our society is very primitive. The alien universe is looking at us and saying, let them blow themselves up. My God. They probably didn't say, my God. And they probably didn't say, let them blow themselves up. But I'm sure they're aware of the intense confusion that happens on this ball of dirt. They've been watching us for centuries. Do I believe that? No, I don't believe anything particularly. But looking at that situation within is going to be difficult. For meditators, it's very difficult because you have the teacher to say, meditate, train your mind. And then you go to the cushion, you sit down, and you don't realize you're dealing with not just 20 minutes of meditation or 3 or 4 hours of meditation. You're looking at centuries and centuries, countless periods of time that aren't even time in the conventional sense of relative truth, but are just timeless, which is even more time, where this kind of confusion has come up, and your karma is free and well favored. A few people, a dozen, 2 dozen people maybe altogether are listening to this, not because this old man is so wonderful and smart, but because I'm talking about something that interests you. Who you are, what this is, what is confusion, what is suffering, where are we going, who are we, what is this situation? And what should we do with the negativity that rises in our mind stream as appearing apparently from out there or apparently from in here? Or where does that come from? Find out what it is, so there's no doubt about it. If you're anytime you're going back and forth, this is the very nature of confusion. That's why I say if you see what this is, it's choiceless. And if you're doing either or, it's just the very nature of duality and of confusion to go, should I do that or should I do that? Go ahead, please.
In the example of perhaps uncovering past abuse, yes, as a part of the meditative path, how do we work with not resting in that as some kind of conclusion, using that uncovering as an explanation, and how do we go further?
That's a great question. First of all, don't necessarily agree with your therapist or your psychiatrist or your meditation teacher. Don't agree with anything. Don't look away from anything. Don't agree with anything, because if you do nothing with it, it will not hold the solidity that it appears when it shows up in your mind stream as something, as a solution, as a cause, as a reason. If you just look at it, just receive, then the actual receiving of that, it will start to, and there's no guarantee because it might take a long time, but it will eventually morph into the form that is actually closer to the original dependent origination that brought it about. You may even start understanding what your dreams are about, or not. Maybe not. Maybe you can't remember your dreams. Maybe you think you don't have them. But Kevin, and a closer response might be just continue to look at it rather than see that the feeling is when you look at it, you think, well, you might not think, well, I need to conclude. You might just feel yourself concluding. This is a conclusion. And this is, of course, not concluding. And how does this feel? Uncertain. This may be scary. And so the ability to withstand that kind of a thing that's coming at you, that kind of a intense appearance of darkness, or an intense appearance of shadows and things that are seem threatening, needs to be looked at. And you don't have to force it. In the other traditions, sometimes there's a forced thing going on. And the Zen tradition is very big on making people sit there forever. I would say sit there forever, but I'm not going to make you do it. Get up and take a break. Go somewhere else. Eat some carrots. Come back later. Sit back down. So do it with your particular karma, which is going to come and go, rather than do it with some macho bell ringer in the front of the zendo. So do a lot of it, but do it with your particular frequency. The praise and blame aspect gets in the way. The self-centeredness, the pride of ourselves of not wanting to be a failure. We prefer pride over shame. I wonder why. Both of them are incorrect. They're incorrect. But if you might be hung up in one area, you might be hung up in the other area, but they're both misunderstanding, and they're both hideouts for the self-centeredness. There's examples everywhere. Go ahead, please.
So, going back to the title of the talk, then the abuser, the inner abuser, could show up as obeying the form. Is that true, Bowie?
Could. The number of ways, I mean, you might even just forget numbers. I mean, just don't even use numbers. But yeah, it's uncountable. You can't. There's the numbers don't apply there. It's extensive beyond the numbers racket. And it's so when that abusing situation shows up in one's environment, depending on how old you are, if you're a completely helpless 3 or 4 year old, it's just the nature of causes and conditions. I'm not saying it's because of your past karma. Please, let's not do that. Although that might be the case. There might be something happening there, but it's not. If you're just at the leading edge of the abuse or whatever that may be, you may just have to receive it. And of course, a 4-year-old was pretty choiceless for them. And so the idea, please go ahead. All
right. Oh, thank you, Teresa Valley. I think I understood you just say that you may not be able to uncover some things or be ready to look. How might a meditator lighten up that drive to get out of misery by trying to look at something that, say, for example, the body and mind isn't ready to handle? Valley.
So I think this is why we have a model or a structure like the Buddha, the teaching person, the Dharma, what is being taught. Everything is dependently arisen. There's no solid separate thing anywhere to speak of it conceptually. But we think there is. And that simple statement isn't going to help, even though that is, in a nutshell, that is the teaching. Even though people elaborate on this and write thousands of pages. And the other one, the most important one that I think that is and they're all equally important, but one that is often neglected is Sangha, community of people who are all perhaps under the same functioning or learning under the same teacher and are studying the same material. Community is so important. It's so important to be with. It might be a Dharma brother or sister that is not easy to get along with, or you don't understand, you think they're full of themselves. But if they're studying the Dharma, there's some difference going on there. Some difference. And to separate, some people don't like the Sangha. I know I hated the Sangha for 35 years. And when I say hated, I'm just saying it's difficult. It's like Coben said when he was asked for a definition of the Sangha, and he said it's a garbage pit. And why did he say that? Because people in the Sangha are beginning to look deeply into the causes and considerations that arise as their particular karma. And it's pretty smelly in that area. And that's why I say over and over again, train your mind. If I had not done some of this myself, I would not be able to talk this way. To realize no self is not a conclusion. You will not have evidence. You will not need evidence. If you need evidence, if you think there's reasons, things that show that you're awake or you're enlightened, this is just highly sophisticated confusion showing up as pretense. You might not know you're pretending because you might be convinced of the very thing that you're convincing others of. There are teachers all over doing this. Watch YouTube. Or don't.
Look about
Yes.
if someone sees who they are fundamentally, will they continue to hide out in many different ways?
Perhaps they will continue, but they will be aware of it, and also they will no longer be refusing the shape of their ears. So they'll actually be responsible for the karma that they used to blame on others. They actually are the karma they've been trying to get rid of. And so therefore they are Mahakala. They are the Buddha. They are Kshitigarbha. They live in hell. They live in heaven. They live there. They live there. They live there. There is no other. There's no other place. There's just this. If you realize it, you're liberated. If you don't realize it, you have work to do. And as I've said many times, I'll help you. And how do I help you? I watch you and I meet you where you're at. Am I bragging about it? Not particularly.
Shoto bowing.
Yeah.
Do we finish finding out who we are?
Nope. No, there's no finish to it. there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There is a rainbow. There is a rainbow. She's on here somewhere. Where is she?
Mark Bowing.
That's Mark.
I think I have forgiven my parents for the terrible violence they did to me. But I don't, but listening to you, I think there must be a lot more in me. And I don't know what else to do besides sit and.
I'm ready to respond.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Forgiveness is a cover up. You're not going to hear that. You might hear it other places, but probably not many. Don't forgive anybody. Forgiveness is a cover up. That's just another way of fueling the self-centered. I'm the one who's forgiven them. It's horse shit. Pardon my reference to animal feces. It's baloney to do that. It's a way. It's more about you getting away from that rather than really being responsible. The ability to respond for what has happened to you. These people that abused you, just like my parents that abused me, it's not about forgiving them. It's seeing deeply into the confusion that they had to live with, that they tried to get rid of by abusing you. It's dependent origination in 101. It's just dependent origination. There are no beings in the skandhas. There's no one to forgive. If you forgive somebody, you just support the self-centeredness that is trying to get better. It's a misunderstanding. Don't believe a word I say. I don't need any followers. I don't need any belief. I only need, what do they say in the Marine Corps? I only need a few good men and women. Basically, I don't need anything. And that's not a bragging point. I don't need anything. I want some stuff, but there's no demand going on. And you, Mark, are not particularly bad by forgiving people. This is conventional teaching. I've just had to forgive them. Finally, I just forgave them. Such a relief. I forgave them. And then the other way around is apologize. And I say, you can forgive. Just forgive it. Say, yeah, I'm going to let that go, or I'm going to forgive them. And then no more strong kind of forgiveness mode going on there. Just like you can say, apologize to somebody. Apologize once, as you've heard me say. I think I gave a talk on that a few years ago. You apologize any more than once, you want something. It's merchandising again. Well, I apologize to you for that. No, aren't you going to forgive me? It's not merchandising. The merchandising part sets up the situation of self-centeredness as opposed to someone else's self-centeredness. And it just goes on and on. It's difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And you don't have to change anything. Just be aware. It's just aware. Further questions?
Sanho bowing.
Sanho.
There are people who have maybe been abusive, dishonest, etc., and I removed myself from the situation. They no longer seem to be those people, but I still don't trust them and don't communicate with them when they reach out. Can you say anything about that? Sanho bowing.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, I wouldn't do anything with it. Like when you say, I no longer communicate with them when they reach out. That reaching out, I don't know for sure because it's very situational. You might have someone reach out that person, maybe you should interact with them somewhat. And the other person reaching out to kind of, because they like you, they had kind of control at you at some point in some way. And they lost that, and they don't realize that you've stopped talking to them because you just had enough. And now they're coming back. And what am I doing? I'm writing a stage play. It's just more stuff going on. So I would say I would leave it up to your intuition or insight about it. Do you need to talk to them? Saving all beings doesn't mean listening to everyone or buying into everyone's craziness and neurosis or the need for attention from you. So I would say, going back to it's very situational with everything. So there's sometimes, that's why you can't set up a protocol. This is how you should act. Someone asks me, how do I relate to my spouse or my brother or something like that? I say, you can receive, but if you're really receiving the passion, aggression, and ignorance as it shows up without adding any commentary, then if you need to do something about it, it will show up choicelessly. It will be just spontaneous understanding about which probably happened to you at one time. Sanho, you probably were interacting and you felt the abuse or whatever, and I'm kind of characterizing it for you here, but then you just stopped talking to them. Probably a good idea. And so less is better, but a little bit's okay. This is why Buddhism is sometimes called the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. So you're there, you're present, not too tight, grasping, not too loose, rejection. And just observe, just receive. In this way, whatever is showing up is going to have less coverings of preconceptions, ideas, judgments, and evaluations about that person. You'll be able to just fundamentally give the person a break without even spontaneously thinking of the thoughts like, I think I'll just give them a break. If you're thinking that, you're probably not. It's just probably a shiny cover-up. Not just you, but anyone. Good question. Further about that, Sanho?
A little bit of the inverse. There are people who may still be abusive, dishonest, thieving, and yet I'm beginning to see that that's not the whole picture. And I wonder, are there any teachings around how to receive those people, but also set a boundary with the negative side or the harmful side?
Yes, talk to me. Which you've been doing. And I'm not saying there aren't, I could say, read the Lankavatara Sutra, the Samdhina Machana Sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, on. You can read those teachings, or you can read commentaries on those teachings, and there are different versions. And you might stumble into something that Trangu Rinpoche said 20 years ago in a particular book of his. That seems to be applying to that. So I'm not saying there aren't things there, but there's nothing that I can specifically think of in your situation. Since you're a student of mine and you're lay ordained, then I would say, talk to me about it. And that doesn't mean I'm going to be available on the spot, although I try to be. But as I say, my general statement about this is train your mind a lot. A lot is better. That's one case, a lot. And then add and subtract and divide, do the math about any given situation, any calculation about any situation. Less is better. Less movement, less doing, less appropriating, less dispensing, less grasping, less rejecting, less shutting down, as open as possible. And that's difficult when that which is arising in front of you is triggering fear in yourself or apprehension and so on. It can be painful to do that. Further question?
Not yet. Thank you, Sanhambang.
Well,
When
yes.
you're bowing. Along those same lines, it seems that there are a lot of religious organizations and lineages that have abuse tied into them.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, some of the abusers have been very helpful, but others have been harmed.
Yeah.
How, in this understanding, do we reconcile those two?
Yeah. I don't know if you can reconcile it. It's like, how do we reconcile the chaos in the world? You can't reconcile that. Reconcile is a a very relative, simple word that has to do with relativity. Ultimate reconciliation is impossible. When I say it's impossible, I don't know that for sure, but that's how it looks from looking at it for a long time. Praise and blame are very thinking something is great and something else is horrible, or one thing is right and someone else is wrong. That covers everything. If you take any position on anything, if you take any position, you're missing the profound vastness that is available to you. When I say vast, I mean really big. If you see it, the hope and fear is gone, and the conclusions, the exclusions, and all of that just don't have any energy. They get their energy from passion, aggression, and ignorance. When you about teachers, there's all kinds of them. There's a big list these days because that whole thing is can't be covered up anymore, just because of the nature of whatever society, timing. My teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, was a great Vajra master and helped me continue to live. Just did not want to live anymore. So you could say I owe him, but there isn't anyone else. There isn't anyone else but him. There isn't anyone else but what he represented. He's basically a nobody. And the causes and conditions that arise, the dependent origination that arises is so sticky. We want to know what's right. We want to know what's wrong. And there are people who completely shut down and abandon all of what the Vidyadhara did in his life, completely donated his life to others after being driven out of or scared out of his country of Tibet by the Chinese. I'm not saying particularly give him credit, but don't ignore at the same time you're accusing him of him or anybody else who's an abuser, who has abused people. We're not trying to get rid of that. I'm not trying to cover it up. But you can't, it's the whole, what is the image? And this doesn't even work, but you could say, throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's not exactly that, but it's like that. Don't grasp this and reject that, and constantly look for some kind of reference point. This is I know people who are extremely intelligent, wonderful people, kind, loving people who go to war with things they don't understand because they need an enemy in order to continue to be good. It's a relative thing. Relative goodness, relative darkness are hooked to each other. It's called not two. I'm happy to entertain you. You can't find a question I won't respond to. You might be embarrassed when you ask me, and you might be even more embarrassed when you hear my response. Maybe that's what you need. Come and get me. Do you think there's someone here? Come and get me. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I've struggled a lot with being dishonest in my past, and I've also found myself, especially in the past, living in close proximity to a lot of dishonest people. How do I work? And it's caused chaos in my relationships. How do I work with that?
So can you back away from those relationships gradually? So it's not to create a lot of friction, but can you slowly back out of that and increase your mind training so you can spend more and more time with people who are training their minds? You're looking at them. I'm not saying these people are saints, but they're on that path. And it may happen in this lifetime. It may happen 3 lifetimes from now. I don't care. I don't look at clocks. Clocks just have rabbits on them. Little rabbits. Number 9 is like a rabbit. Number 7 is like a hanging tree with no noose. I'm being silly, but I'm just saying, just find a way to gradually back away from those situations. If I'm even understanding your situation correctly, which I may not be, I may be missing something that you're asking me. Be more direct, please, and I'll respond.
If I'm in a relationship with someone that isn't dishonest, who I've been dishonest to, and I guess I don't know how to work with that situation.
Are you still in Are you still in a relationship with that person?
Yes.
Do they know that you've been dishonest?
Yes.
Okay. Well, did they forgive you?
Complicated answer.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a solid answer to
Yeah, I'm
that.
not. It's rhetorical. I'm not looking for for the response to that. But I'm just saying, it sounds to me like just work. Do they meditate? Do they have any interest in mind training at all?
Some.
Yeah.
Not intensely though.
Well, I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, I just needed to know to be able to respond. I would just say they're not objecting to you meditating or studying the Dharma particularly. Yeah, so it sounds fine. So just keep going. You're a young guy. What are you, 15, 16?
23.
Yeah, 23. Not that much difference. So I would say just keep going. I've talked to you enough to know that you're sincere. You have insofar as I can see, you're genuine about your interest in the path. And I would say keep going. As long as I'm here, I'll always, as long as I'm alive, I'll always be here to support you or help you if you want it. And if you don't, I'm also fine being, not being here at all. So it makes no difference. But I'm saying, don't take anything for granted. Don't believe anything. Don't disbelieve anything, and don't look away. And how we do that is to see the way we spontaneously believe something, and how we spontaneously disbelieve other things. We because it is coming out of dependent origination, there's no being behind that. But the being, the self-centeredness, the subjectivity, will see that attitude, that emotion, and will join with it. Because anytime you take a position on anything, the self-centeredness, which is unreal, gets nutrition or fuel to continue to be self-centered from that grasping this, rejecting that. I think she's good. I think she's bad. I think he's good. I think this is good. That's bad. This. And it's there. I mean, you can find good and evil everywhere. It's all over CNN. It's just everywhere. It's in our families. It's in our relationships. I would say, clarify. Sit down, hold still. How do you do that? Look at the confusion. And notice how much confusion is just coming up spontaneously in your own mind stream that is also tends to find a cause outside of it, in another person, possibly even in the teacher, which that's what she's there for. When I say she, I mean the teacher. Teacher has no gender. Further, Ian?
Yeah, I have a little bit further question. And what I'm hearing you say is, is there a way to observe relative dishonesty without owning it as my identity? Or do I?
Go ahead. You can do either or. Go ahead.
I thought I asked my question.
Well, you
I'm
asked.
just wondering if there's a way to observe dishonesty without owning it, or or is something that needs to be owned?
No. Forget owning. Yeah. If you just observe dishonesty, if you own it, then there's an identity that's getting a credential for at least I own my dishonesty. I'll do it. Observe, let the dishonesty be as wrinkled and shabby and uncomfortable as it is. However it appears, that's how it appears. First thought, best thought. First impression is it. Anything else is probably the confetti you sprinkle on it, or the sprinklers. Just observe. Keep more and more radical, more and more minimalist, more and more just this. If you have to say anything, you can say just this, and eventually you'll say just. And eventually that word will vanish and you'll just receive without a description. You might have to tell somebody, if somebody asks you how to meditate, you might say just receive, but it's even more radical than that. The words are gone. The spaciousness begins to crack open. And this, to the self-centered mind, this is terrifying. It can be terrifying. And without this kind of an algorithm of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, without that structure, very difficult for the individual to proceed. And there are people who are claiming to be, when I say claiming, I'm not against that. You have to start somewhere, claiming to practice Buddhism, and they have robes on. Won't believe anything. This is a cloth. This is not an object.
Thank you.
This is not an object. If you see clearly, you don't see this. If you see clearly, you do not see what is on my head.
I think I still see it.
No, you don't. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Thank
Okay.
you, Sokuzan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure, my friend. Further questions, if you have them?
There are a few questions from YouTube.
Okay. Thank you.
Susan in Traverse City asks, do we attract what we experience in this lifetime? Is it just a byproduct of dependent arising?
I would say it's just dependent arising. Dependent origination is the very nature of this whole situation, relatively, and in deeper layers of consciousness where there's just still some kind of objectivity happening, like a thought pattern. That's an object. It just is on a frequency that is not as apparent. So if I'm understanding your question, yeah, there's attraction, repulsion, and neutrality happening all the time with everything. The more you can just observe, the more you won't know if there's anybody observing anything. The more the observing will be without an observer, and the more the observing will be less and less take on some kind of ontological or phenomenological position or status or texture. It would be less and less and less. And the ego mind doesn't like that. Ego mind wants to be someone going somewhere, having something, having feelings and emotions. And each path is going to be different. Some people's path is flooded with all kinds of phenomena, and yet it's less in this physical realm and more in intermediate state, or in the Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, to be technical about it. How do I know? I don't know. I don't operate out of relative knowledge, although it's available to me. I have a dictionary. I have Chisho. Wait a minute, Chisho's in retreat. I can't even use him right now.
A question from Joseph in Kalamazoo.
Joseph.
In my social emotional learning class for 6th graders, our curriculum instructs us to teach our students to regularly name what they are feeling. Is this a healthy practice? Can you think of a way to teach this without leading my students towards locking down or drawing conclusions?
How old are they? 6th graders? So they're 6th graders, like 12, maybe? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't do that, but I'm not against someone who is working with children in some way other than just cramming them with stuff. So there's some kind of empowering them a little bit to do that. But yes, the naming and so on is workable in some ways, but with this trained their mind, then it just becomes a project to try to get their children to act different. Rather than and acting, anytime you're trying to get yourself to act different, you're covering up what is fundamentally the issue. It happens it's all over. It's just, what is that? What's that word? All pervasive. Yes. Confusion is everywhere. But I wouldn't say, if you're doing that, I would say, I wouldn't make it too militant. And if someone can't do that, then I would encourage the can't do that. In other words, I would be with that. And one way, I'm just going to come up with something here so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Someone says, I can't really do that. I can't name anything. And so, then you would acknowledge that, yes, that's how you do it. But I'm not naming it. Yes, you are. You're doing exactly what you need to do. Don't set up any standards for 12-year-olds. That's what I'm saying. Someone who's doing that out of some kind of a satipatthana or understanding of mindfulness practice coming out of the 25 centuries ago. Misunderstanding. This is not the social structure that was happening in ancient India or Japan or China. It was much different. These children, they didn't have those things. They didn't have that. They didn't have the incredible communication between, or education, or sophistication. And to go back into that without acknowledging that and set it up as an accomplishment. They tend to want to, young people tend to want to accomplish, be somebody, be educated, get somewhere. There might be, out of 100 children that age, there might be 2 or 3 that are actually interested in meditation, but that should be their choice, not some kind of thing that we set up for children. Since you asked, that's my response. I'm happy to talk to you more about it if you wish, or not. We never have to discuss it again.
Unyabali,
Yes.
earlier when we were talking about this talk title, you made a statement saying that the interior abuser is looking for permission.
Yes.
So how does someone perhaps who has a lot of power give permission to others?
You mean the example of somebody who has a lot of power and other people whose interior abuser is resonating with that? They do it just by being the big, huge, robust, I'll do it my way clown, being out there, and people who have been hiding out from that aspect of themselves because it's not socially acceptable. Suddenly they have somebody who's breaking through the convention and being that person that's finally saying what they've been feeling about the Jews, or saying what they've been feeling about Black people or any other group. And it just, the person just starts to feel validated in some way, a way of actually joining something, killing people, kill people. We have the situation that we have is not just one person that's a bad guy. It's the whole mess of society. And we keep trying to return to something like democracy now. Very, very difficult to do that. I'm not saying we should do away with it. Of course not. But I'm saying the confusion, the only way I understand it, and the way I understand it, is each person has to train their mind. You have to train their mind. You can't do it with a society. Even the Sangha situation, in my experience, is very difficult because some people in the Sangha want that kind of power. And I've met them over the last close to 50 years. Some people want that, but they're part of the Sangha, so you have to work with them. More? That's good. Good question.
The whole idea of permission, I think, is what is it that people see, or that we see, that in someone else that then converts into what we call permission? Or what is permission?
Well, I don't know. It's, you could take it the other way and say the person who is who has a teacher, which I had teachers who continually relates to that at a different level, which is still relative, but it's a level of consciousness that is manifesting as the conventional idea around the bodhisattva, or the being who's given up on his or her motivation to get somewhere for themselves and just about serving others. And if one does that, eventually you find that doesn't mean meddling with others. That means being respectful of people's confusion. Not easy to do if you've been disrespecting your own confusion. So it goes the other way. The other loop of it is to go underneath and go backwards. And then, it's just like the whole idea of the God and the devil kind of polarity. And this is why you see even in ancient Christianity, there was some respect being paid to demonic energy, kind of energy. And we could go back and talk about that, but don't need to do that. I'm just saying that those are not separate from each other. Delusion and awakening are not two different things. Delusion is delusion, awakening is awakening, but actual awakening transcends both of those. But you have to start somewhere. So you have to start with a rowboat with oars and see that there's an oar here, there's an oar here. More? Less?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Further questions?
Santo bowing.
Go ahead, son.
For the people who need power, how can we be respectful of them and their need of power? Santo bowing.
And again, Sano, it's situational. So that structure could be, your next door neighbor. It could be your boss. It could be. And it would be, some people you would actually just go away. Some people you might move right into their territory by 3.5 inches and say, so how are you feeling? How are things going for you? You might be inquisitive. You're not ignoring their negativity or ignore their power grab, but you might try to change the frequency. So you begin to talk to them in another level. I mean, if they, I don't want to go too far with this because I think it's your situation, each person's situation, and it's not about manipulating them into being someone else. It's about meeting them where they're at. If you haven't faced your own confusion, not just you, Sano, but anybody, if you're not faced that, if there's still some kind of difficulty with your identity or who you are, it's going to be difficult to meet other people where they are. On the other hand, if you try to do that, and if you're a meditator, if you have a strong sitting practice, you might start to see that what's resonating in you is starting to resonate as confusion is actually starting to resonate with the confusion you're trying to address or you're projecting onto in the other person, if you follow me. They're not separate. Everything's dependently arisen. It looks like they're solid beings, but they are not. And if you understand what this is, you actually are fearless. In other words, you're not afraid of their negativity. I'm not saying that if you're 4 years old and the other person is 35 years old, you might not be physically afraid of them. Of course, that's a different situation. But if it's another person, an adult that you're talking to, then you could meet that negativity by stepping into it. When I say step into it, it's lots of some metaphorical ideas, but you're just with that. How does that, you might ask them about that without spelling it out, or like saying, how does it feel to be an asshole? I'm not saying that. I'm saying you might say, I noticed the way you work with negativity is very specific and very definite. You do that very definitely. How does that, is there any kind of thoughts behind that, how you work with that? In other words, you're entering into their area and because they need approval so bad, they will read that as approval. And that gives you reading that as approval gives you some entrance further into their cave of demons, which they think are angels. It gives you entrance in there. And then you're able to maybe relate with them in a way that where it gives you more clarity about their motivation. Their motivation is probably going to be fear or the need of control, which is another way of saying fear. They can't stand an open dimension of being. And the one who realizes their true nature, there isn't anything but this. They aren't separate from anything. The whole open dimension is not about the agoraphobia of the ego. It's about it's about time and it's about space. So just meet it where it's at. Strong sitting practice will give you, allow you to get a little bit closer than you would have otherwise, and do it with, do it with your own intelligence. If you really sincerely want to help that person, to be with that person, then you're going to have to talk to them about stuff that is uncomfortable. And seeing someone's confusion, their delusion, and their neurosis, the bubbling edges of that crap that is neurosis, difficult to meet that without wanting to what? Medicate them, let alone meditate them. And I have to meet them without any desire to fix them or do anything other than your general desire as you receive the precept to be with all things. Start there, be with that kind of crap. That doesn't mean accept it. If it starts to get smelly, then just say, well, got to get going, got another appointment. Even though you don't have another appointment, in the conventional sense, yes, you have another appointment. You have to be by yourself for a while to get away from them. You don't have to tell them what the appointment is.
Kevin Bowing,
Yes, Kevin.
earlier you mentioned sense of humor. How does sense of humor help us when we knock over a rock and find our inner abuser or thief?
Yeah. Just if you see this thief and you see the inner abuser and you grasp at that to get rid of it, you grasp at that to explain it, you grasp at that to justify it, you grasp at that, any kind of relationship with that is based on otherness, that inner abuser. Look at the inner abuser. I'm gonna go into this very literally and visually. Look at the inner abuser, and notice the tremendous space around that. That's the sense of humor. The sense of humor is realizing that nothing is real. I don't care how much it hurts. The actual pain is humor. It doesn't mean you're laughing about it. You're not going to laugh about that. But if you have pain, the next time you have intense pain around anything, go in and see the spaciousness of it. You might yell louder, but you need to be not separate from anything that's arising. I think it takes, the relative word is it takes courage to do that. And how do you get courage? You don't get courage. You are courage if you stop particularly buying into believing your thoughts, your ideas, your conclusions, and just watch things conclude. Watch it conclude. If you watch it conclude and you don't second the motion, it can't keep going. The motion needs to be seconded in Robert's Rules of Order.
So is humor synonymous for space, Bowing?
Yes. The conventional way of demonstrating that is the humorist, the stand-up comic, whoever it may be, whoever your favorite comic is, will set something up, and then you start to buy into it as something they're saying, and then they drop out of it. They pull the rug out from under you, and suddenly you're left with the openness of that, and then we laugh. So it's just they're just masters of space. The one who is able to set up a story in such a way. George Carlin was a master at that. He was so masterful at it that he fell into his own space constantly. And that's why he was so powerful, such a powerful comic, if those of you who remember him. The other one, a real early one in the 1950s that used his rhetoric was a lot of swear words and disrespectful images. Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce was actually probably the first comedian. Other than the Buddha was pretty funny.
Total Bowing.
Yes.
When a comedian pulls the rug out from us and we're hit with unexpected space, it's funny, but sometimes when life does that, it's terrifying.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
It's just a different expression of space. Just terror is terror. You don't have to laugh about terror, but just don't explain it. Don't justify it. Don't blame anyone. Don't abandon the terror for what caused it. Don't abandon the terror for how it could go away or what it is or trying to make it into something funny. Just be terrified. Be genuine. Be who you are. Be genuine. Ready for anything. When I say ready for anything, I'm not saying some kind of militant kind of thing or some kind of macho. I mean, the most macho people in the world are mothers who give birth. That's pretty macho. I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing that they do. I know I was born. And my mother and I, just a quick story. The doctor came out and told my aunt, this is not good. I don't know if I can even save one of them, let alone both of them. And he saved both of us.
Anna Maria Bowing. What is it about humor breathing into a situation much more easily when I am telling someone the story of agony as opposed to me being alone with it. It seems like humor jumps out the back window when I'm alone. And yet, in the second and third incarnation of that, it just steps right in.
That's why you're an actor. I mean, actors get on stage and they get on stage to release their demons. I mean, just to put it literally, that's why painters paint and artists art and poets poet and actors act. We have something and we don't know. We have something and we understand and we want to say this. We want to express this. So we find ourselves a way to do that. Been happening since ancient times. And some actors are extremely good at manifesting those kind of archetypes in such a way that they resonate with large numbers of people. Other people, maybe they don't resonate with large numbers of people, but they're doing something very similar. One is not better than the other. Just like anyone sitting down to make a painting or something, that painting isn't a bad painting opposed to a beautiful painting. It's just an expression, human expression. Final question, says Unyo. No final question? Going, gone. Dedicate the merit.
Us got and frayed in all places, so that we in every cinch and being together realize the Buddha's way.
The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all the others, all animal ones. Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, Spirit Prajna, Paramita. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions of the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect the Bukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy